The night was unusually cold for a small town in America. The local talent show, hosted in the creaky old community center, buzzed with chatter and laughter as families filled the seats. Children clutched their parents' hands nervously, teenagers whispered about who might win, and adults looked forward to a night of light-hearted entertainment. No one imagined that the most unforgettable performance of the evening would come from a boy hardly anyone noticed, an underfed, poorly dressed kid who sat alone near the back, clutching a guitar almost as big as his body. His name was Daniel. 14 years old, thin as a rail, with clothes 2 sizes too small and shoes that had been patched so many times they hardly resembled shoes anymore. Daniel was known in town, though not well. Most saw him as the boy who wandered the streets, offering to mow lawns or carry groceries for a few dollars. He lived with his mother in a small, run-down trailer at the edge of town. His father had left years ago, leaving behind only debts and memories that still stung. Life had not been kind to Daniel, but through it all, he carried one thing that no hardship could take away: his voice. From an early age, Daniel sang to comfort himself and his mother. When there was no money for food, when the electricity was cut, when the cold bit through the thin walls of their trailer, Daniel would strum the beat-up guitar his father had abandoned and sing. His mother often whispered, "Danny, your voice is a gift from God. Don't ever hide it." But outside the walls of their tiny home, Daniel rarely sang for anyone. He feared being laughed at. He feared his ragged clothes and humble life would overshadow his talent. That night at the talent show, Daniel hadn't even planned to perform. He came only to watch. He didn't have the $10 entry fee, and besides, he felt sure no one would care about his music. But when a friend who was scheduled to sing fell sick, the organizers asked if anyone else wanted to take the open slot. At first, silence filled the room. Then, almost by accident, Daniel raised his hand. The crowd turned, surprised to see him. A few kids snickered. Some adults frowned, as though unsure if a boy like him even belonged on that stage. The host hesitated but finally nodded. "All right, son. Come on up. What's your name?" Daniel shuffled forward, his hands trembling as he clutched his guitar. "Daniel," he whispered. "And what will you be performing?" "Hotel California," he said softly, almost afraid to speak the words. The crowd murmured. A classic, a difficult song even for seasoned performers. A boy like him attempting it seemed almost laughable. But Daniel took his place under the harsh stage lights, his thin frame dwarfed by the microphone stand. For a moment, he froze. The whispers, the doubtful eyes, the weight of poverty and years of invisibility pressed on him like a mountain. He thought of stepping down. He thought of running away. Then, he remembered his Mo. Then, he remembered his mother's words, "Your voice is a gift. Don't ever hide it." He closed his eyes, strummed the first chords on his battered guitar, and began to sing. From the first note, the room fell silent. His voice, raw yet hauntingly beautiful, carried with it the depth of someone who had known pain but also hope. Every lyric of Hotel California rolled out not as an imitation but as something reborn through him, aching, soulful, alive. The crowd leaned in, mesmerized. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others blinked back tears, surprised that such power could come from a boy who looked like he hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. By the time Daniel reached the chorus, the entire hall was transformed. The same kids who had laughed earlier sat frozen, their mouths open in awe. Parents exchanged glances, some whispering, "Where did this boy come from?" Even the judges, known for their critical eyes, seemed captivated, their pens resting motionless. And then, something unexpected happened. A man at the back, grey-haired, wearing a leather jacket, slowly stood. His eyes widened, and his hands trembled as he watched Daniel sing. Few in the crowd noticed him at first, but the man's face was etched with disbelief, as if he had seen a ghost. His name was Richard, a former touring musician who had once dreamed of fame but lost himself to addiction and regret. He had wandered into the hall only because he heard there was free coffee and music. But as Daniel sang, Richard felt something he hadn't felt in decades, the stirrings of hope. Daniel reached the final verse, pouring his soul into every word. When the last note faded, silence hung heavy in the air. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the crowd erupted. Applause thundered, cheers echoed off the walls, and people rose to their feet. Some clapped with tears in their eyes. Others shouted Daniel's name. Daniel blinked, overwhelmed. He had never heard his name spoken with admiration, never seen so many eyes fixed on him with respect. His hands shook as he lowered his guitar. For the first time in his life, he felt visible, seen not for his poverty, but for his gift. The host returned to the stage, his voice choked with emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it again for Daniel. But before Daniel could leave, Richard pushed his way to the front. His eyes glistened as he spoke into the microphone. I don't know this boy, but I'll tell you one thing, he just reminded me why music exists. It's not about fame or money. It's about truth, about touching souls. And tonight, this young man did exactly that. The crowd roared again, louder than before. Daniel's face flushed. He wanted to hide, but at the same time, he wanted to stay in that moment forever. When the show ended, people crowded around him. Some offered to buy him a new guitar. Others pressed folded bills into his hand, whispering, "Keep singing, son. Don't give up." The judges announced him the winner, though no one doubted the outcome. But the real prize came later. Richard approached Daniel and knelt so their eyes met. "Son," he said, voice trembling, "I've wasted most of my life. But I see something in you I haven't seen in years. You have a gift, something the world needs to hear. If you'll let me, I want to help you. I'll teach you, guide you, stand beside you. Not for money. Not for fame. Just because I believe in you." Daniel's throat tightened. He thought of his mother, waiting in their cold trailer, and how she always told him his voice mattered. Tears spilled down his cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep singing," Richard replied. And Daniel did. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter. Word of his performance spread through town, then beyond. Videos from the talent show went viral online, capturing hearts across the country. People from all walks of life saw themselves in Daniel. His struggles, his resilience, his unshakable spirit. Donations poured in, not just for him, but for his mother too. They moved into a small but warm apartment. For the first time in years, they could eat 3 meals a day without worry. But Daniel never let success change him. He remembered the days when no one saw him. So, as opportunities grew, he used his voice not just for music, but for kindness. He sang at charity events, raised funds for children in poverty, and visited shelters to share hope with those who felt invisible. He carried with him the lesson of that night, that the greatest gift one can offer is not talent itself, but the courage to share it in the service of others. Years later, standing on a grand stage in front of thousands, Daniel introduced a song with tears in his eyes. "I was just a poor boy once, too scared to sing. But one act of kindness, one person believing in me, had changed my life. If you take anything from my music, let it be this. Never underestimate the power of kindness. It can turn a whisper into a voice, and a voice into a song the world will never forget." The crowd erupted in applause. And somewhere in that audience, Richard sat quietly, his eyes wet with pride. He knew that in helping Daniel, he had redeemed a part of himself too. Because in the end, the story wasn't just about a poor boy singing Hotel California. It was about the way music and kindness can bridge worlds, heal wounds, and remind us all of the extraordinary power of humanity. And Daniel, the boy who once hid in the shadows, had become a beacon of light, proving that sometimes the poorest among us hold the richest treasures of all.